On July 27, 2025, in Oslo, Norway, the usually calm halls of Scandinavia's most respected peace institution suddenly buzzed with a kind of energy you could almost feel in the air. The Nobel Peace Prize Committee had just dropped their shortlist of 5 names, but one name sent shockwaves far beyond that quiet Nordic room. Ibrahim Traoré, the interim leader of Burkina Faso. A man who wasn't groomed in elite academies, didn't climb polished political ladders, and sure as heck didn't gain power through some fancy election campaign. He stepped into leadership through sheer conviction and grit. And now, against all expectations, he was the front-runner for the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize. What made his nomination so electric wasn't the controversy swirling around him, it was the simplicity, the clarity. In a world where politics often feels like a stage play, full of photo ops and scripted handshakes, Traoré went old school. Real old school. Sweat, labor, sacrifice, truth. His battleground wasn't parliament. It was hunger. His revolution wasn't about headlines. It was about education for kids, dignity for women, and real support for farmers who'd been ignored for decades. How in the world did a 36-year-old soldier from one of the poorest nations on Earth become a symbol of global peace? That's what stunned everyone. This was historic, the first time a leader under 40 and one who came to power through a military transition was recognized as a serious contender for one of humanity's most prestigious awards. The Nobel Committee didn't mince words. They described Traoré as a rare figure in today's world. Someone who didn't pick up arms to dominate or intimidate, but to defend the moral conscience of his people. The kind of peace he inspires in Burkina Faso doesn't come from high-level treaties or high-rise conference rooms. It comes from ordinary people choosing dignity, unity, and self-reliance over fear. Traoré's journey from foot soldier to statesman represents a whole new definition of peace. One not crafted on paper, but grown in the fields and villages where people live, work, and struggle every day. His nomination forced the world to confront some uncomfortable assumptions about modern leadership, about peace itself, and what it means to govern in the 21st century. Suddenly, conversations erupted everywhere. From the busy streets of Ouagadougou to the marble halls of power in Washington, Paris, and Moscow. People weren't just talking about a nomination, they were talking about a shift, a shake-up, a challenge to the old rules. And that conversation began with what Traoré had done since taking charge in September 2022. From that very day, he launched reforms that rattled not only Burkina Faso, but countries across Africa, and even leaders far beyond the continent. His philosophy was bold, but surprisingly simple. Peace through self-reliance. But that was only the beginning. But hold up, the real jaw-dropping part isn't the nomination. It's what Traoré did after taking power, shaking up Africa, global politics, and the entire idea of what leadership looks like. Want to see how deep this transformation goes? When Ibrahim Traoré seized power on September 29, 2022, the world figured it was just another chapter in Africa's long line of political shake-ups. But what he did next wasn't just unexpected. It flipped the script on everything people thought they knew about military transitions. Traoré didn't grab power to sit on a fancy throne. He went straight to work rebuilding his country from the ground up, using a strategy that sounded almost too simple for global politics. Peace through real independence. Peace earned by relying on your own hands, not foreign pockets. One of the wildest accomplishments, and the one that sent global analysts scrambling, was his reconciliation with more than 12,000 armed militants. But he didn't crush them with guns or prisons. Nah. Traoré's team used community healing, vocational training, and resettlement programs to turn fighters into neighbors again. Instead of feeding the cycle of violence, he tried something almost unheard of, breaking it through rehabilitation and inclusion. And you know what? It actually worked. The world didn't know whether to be impressed or confused. Then came the move that made corporations across continents sweat bullets. Traoré returned 3.88 million hectares of farmland, land that had been swallowed up by foreign companies. back to the people who actually worked it. His message was loud and clear. The soil belongs to the folks who farm it, not to investors sipping lattes in distant offices. It was bold, unapologetic, and downright revolutionary. But Traoré wasn't done. Not even close. He helped launch the Sahel Life Alliance, a joint effort between Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali to fight environmental collapse head-on. Together, these nations planted a staggering 800 million trees across the Sahel, not as a PR stunt, not for some climate summit applause, but because villages were literally being swallowed by desert. This massive ecological comeback effort became a symbol of hope in one of the harshest regions on Earth. Next came the budget changes. Oh boy. Traoré slashed government spending by 60%, cutting out bloated administrative fluff and redirecting that cash straight into the essentials, education and healthcare. In just 18 months, Burkina Faso built 2,400 new schools and 700 health centers, a pace the region had never seen before. Families who had never seen a clinic within 50 miles suddenly had one within walking distance. Kids who'd never touched a textbook finally had classrooms. And because he understood that hungry kids learn nothing, he made sure 95% of rural primary school students received free lunches made from local crops. It wasn't just a meal, it became a bridge between farmers and classrooms, stitching together agriculture and education into a single cycle of empowerment. Then came a global headline maker. On May 4, 2025, Traoré pardoned 1,100 former militants and welcomed them into the Farmers of Peace initiative. The United Nations praised the program as something the world could model, especially in conflict zones where people needed a second chance more than another war. These weren't just policies. They were a whole new philosophy, a peace built on dignity, labor, unity, and purpose. A peace you could see, touch, and measure. But then something happened that nobody, absolutely nobody, expected. Just when the world thought Traoré couldn't shake things up any further, the Vatican stepped in with a move so unexpected it left global diplomats scrambling. Ready for the twist. Just when everyone thought the story couldn't get any crazier, the plot twisted harder than a Hollywood drama. On July 1, 2025, during the Feast of All Saints, a voice echoed from one of the most influential places on Earth, the Vatican. And not just any voice. It was Pope Leo XIV himself, a man known for being brutally honest, deeply spiritual, and allergic to political fluff. Out of nowhere, the Pope paused in his address and spoke a name nobody expected to hear that day, Ibrahim Traoré. His words stunned the world. He didn't speak like a diplomat or a preacher reading off cue cards. He spoke like someone who had truly seen something. He said, "When I pray for peace, the face of a young soldier from Burkina Faso comes to mind. He does not preach through scripture, but through sweat and soil. He has never walked the corridors of Rome, yet he treats the world's poor as his cathedral." Boom! A spiritual mic drop. This wasn't just praise. It was historic. The Vatican officially endorsing a sitting African leader, especially one who rose through a military transition, was something that had never happened before. Not once in the centuries-long history of the Holy See. Overnight, Traoré went from regional reformer to global symbol. The endorsement wasn't just religious. It was deeply political. It challenged the long-standing idea that only polished, Western-trained leaders deserved global recognition. It told the world that peace could come from boots, not briefcases. From fields, not fancy forums. From people who worked with their hands, not just waved pens over agreements. And the ripple effect? Oh, it was massive. France, Burkina Faso's former colonial power, responded with a mix of surprise and caution. President Jean-Luc Moreau acknowledged Traoré's results, saying, "We may disagree with his methods, but we cannot ignore the outcomes. He is rewriting Africa's story with action, not dependency." Translation? They're impressed, but salty. Meanwhile, in Washington, Secretary of State Janet Collins spoke like a true diplomat, polished, measured, and carefully balanced. She said the nomination was an opportunity for the world to rethink peace in the 21st century. But behind the polished script, everyone knew Traoré's independence-focused model, rejecting IMF pressures, banning exploitative mining firms, and nationalizing food systems, was making Western policymakers real uncomfortable. Then Brazil chimed in, and they didn't hold back. President Luis G. Costa said, "I once called him the new Sankara, but he corrected me and said, 'I'm just a farmer in uniform.' That's when I knew he deserved the Nobel." Latin America loved him. The Global South loved him. His movement resonated like an anthem. Even Moscow weighed in. The Russian president praised him as a builder of food systems, schools, and unity, not ideology. And honestly, that was the vibe. Traoré wasn't preaching theories, he was delivering results. But the real magic wasn't just in diplomatic circles, it was in the streets. Night fell over Ouagadougou, but the city didn't sleep. Lanterns lit up every avenue. Drummers played rhythms older than colonial maps. People filled the streets chanting his name. Vendors handed out Bissap drinks and roasted peanuts. A hand-painted banner flapped between two acacia trees. "We no longer beg. Now the world listens." For the people of Burkina Faso, this wasn't a nomination. It was validation, proof that their sacrifices, their hard labor, their unity were finally being seen. But this wave of hope didn't stop at the border. From Mali to Niger, youth projected Traoré's speeches on walls, chanting, "One Sahel, one hope." Still, not everyone was popping confetti. Some elders warned that global attention attracts global pressure. But even the skeptics couldn't deny the truth. Fewer terror attacks, higher crop yields, new clinics, full classrooms. Peace wasn't a theory anymore. It was happening. And the world was watching. But trust me, the story doesn't end with crowds cheering. What happened next shook the entire African continent and forced world powers to rethink Africa's future. Ready for the final chapter? The day after the Nobel Peace Prize nomination dropped, July 27, 2025, history unfolded live in front of the world. In Ouagadougou, the leaders of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger stood side by side at a press conference, unlike anything the region had seen in decades. No tension, no rehearsed political theater, just three leaders speaking with a shared purpose. Their message? Traoré's nomination wasn't just about one man, it was about Africa reclaiming its own storyline. They declared a new era of cooperation, not just in defense, but in agriculture, education, public health, and media. Then they unveiled something bold: the Joint Civil Command of the Sahel, a unified institution created to coordinate food security programs, rebuild conflict-torn communities, and expand rural medical systems. It was like saying, "We're done waiting for foreign powers to save us. We're doing this ourselves." Neighboring nations, Guinea, Chad, Togo, sent their congratulations. Even more surprising, several hinted they wanted to adopt Traoré's playbook: self-reliance, regional unity, and ditching foreign debt traps. Within the African Union, debates exploded overnight. Delegates questioned whether it was time to judge leaders not by how they came to power, but by what they built afterward. One EU commissioner, speaking off the record, said, "We can't keep punishing leaders who deliver results just because they didn't arrive in a limousine." A statement so blunt it practically broke the internet. Meanwhile, the Western world watched with cautious curiosity. They respected the nomination, but you could feel their discomfort. For decades, major powers shaped Africa's politics from the outside. But now, Africa was speaking loudly, confidently, and without permission. International lenders quietly reopened communication lines with Burkina Faso, the same lenders the country had walked away from only months earlier. Suddenly, everyone wanted a seat at the table they once ignored. It was clear. This nomination had grown into a global awakening. Night after night, the streets of Ouagadougou kept glowing with celebrations. Drums, dancing, lanterns, the vibe was electric. Kids wore shirts with Traoré's silhouette. Elders blessed the crowds. Former fighters, now farmers of peace, irrigated their fields under the moonlight, no longer manning checkpoints. Across the Sahel, the feeling was the same. Hope was spreading like wildfire. And then came the moment that summed it all up. Traoré stood on the balcony of the presidential palace, humbled, emotional, speaking like a man who knew the weight of every word. He said, "This nomination belongs to every mother who feeds her child from her own harvest, to every young person who picked up a shovel instead of a weapon, to every teacher who taught beneath a tree. We build peace not to impress the world, but to survive." His message hit home across the continent. Students from Lagos to Johannesburg held vigils and debates. Art galleries opened exhibits inspired by his agricultural revolution. Social media erupted with #Nobel for Africa, trending worldwide. Pan-African leaders issued a powerful statement. If he wins, it is Africa's victory. A farmer president is stronger than a president in exile. A fed village is stronger than any foreign loan. As December 10, 2025 approaches, the day the Nobel Committee reveals its final decision, the world is holding its breath. Traoré, just 36 years old, stands ready to become the first sitting African head of state and the first leader who rose through a military transition to win the Nobel Peace Prize. But here's the truth: whether he wins or not, the game has already changed. He's forced the world to rethink peace, not as a fancy signature on a treaty, but as justice, dignity, and land in the hands of the people. Not as political theater, but as boots on the ground work, day after day. The world isn't just watching his journey. It's waking up to an entirely new definition of leadership, one rooted in grit, truth, and community. And no matter what happens in Oslo,